All right. So, we've had some listeners write in about this article,
Hmm.
and it's got some pretty alarming claims about, the whole global financial system, like maybe being on the verge of collapse.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely eye-catching headlines for sure.
Totally. And that's kind of why we wanted to dig into it, not to scare anyone,
Oh,
but
yeah.
to, unpack it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, just from the top, it seems to go pretty hard on the whole idea that ditching the gold standard was like the original sin or something.
Well, it's definitely true that that decision back in the day, I mean, it really set the stage for how we got to where we are now,
Yeah.
with so much debt driving everything.
Right. Like that seems to be the article's big argument is that we're
Yeah.
on this debt treadmill and eventually like the bill always comes due.
Hmm.
And they point to like how much the US is paying just in interest each year, which is mind-boggling.
Yeah, no, that's a staggering figure when you actually look at it.
But then there's this whole other layer to the article where it talks about the BRICS nations and gold, and it gets kind of hard to follow. What's the deal there?
Yeah, so this is where I think it gets really interesting because the article's coming from a very sort of U.S.-centric viewpoint. Like the dollar's going to crash.
Right.
But what the BRICS nations seem to be doing is not just reacting to that, but like actively building out an alternative.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about one currency failing, but like a whole power shift happening.
Yeah, exactly. And gold might be part of that equation, though.
Hmm.
It's hard to say for sure, but like look at India, for example. Their silver imports have gone up like 8 times this year.
Wow, seriously.
Yeah, so something's going on there, right?
Okay, so that's kind of blowing my mind a little bit, to be honest. Like, how worried should people be hearing all this? Is this like a when, not if situation or more like worst case scenario stuff?
Yeah, I get that it could be a bit anxiety-inducing to think about. But here's the thing with economics. Predicting the future is more like reading tea leaves sometimes than an exact science.
Yeah, true.
So even the smartest people get it wrong a lot.
Right.
So this article is really highlighting what they see as a potential worst-case scenario, not necessarily the most likely outcome.
Okay, so maybe I won't start stocking up on canned goods just yet. But they do give some advice in the article, like invest in gold, become more self-sufficient, that kind of thing. Is that
Mm.
legit or bordering on doomsday prepping?
Well, those are classic hedges against instability for a reason. When systems go haywire, people tend to flock to things that hold their value, like gold or even real estate.
Yeah.
It's about security. And self-sufficiency gives you options if things go sideways on a larger scale.
Right, makes sense. So how should someone even begin to navigate all of this?
The key is don't just blindly follow anyone's advice, even mine. Figure out your own risk tolerance. Do your research, what makes sense for your situation.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the headlines, but everyone's situation is different.
Exactly.
But one thing that is for sure is that even if this whole financial doomsday scenario is overblown, the issues the article brings up, like runaway debt and inflation, those are hitting people's wallets right now.
Oh, absolutely. Those are very real problems, not just some abstract future threat.
Exactly. And that's kind of why we're doing this, not to cause panic, but to give people the knowledge to navigate this stuff.
Because knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
Especially when things are uncertain.
Totally. Speaking of knowledge, though, the article focuses a lot on these traditional economic factors, but it barely mentions technology like crypto, blockchain, AI. All that stuff seems like a pretty big oversight.
Oh, it's a huge factor, and the technological landscape is changing so rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely has a massive impact on all of this.
It's like we're trying to predict the weather in the middle of a hurricane while a volcano erupts nearby.
Yeah, that's a pretty good analogy. There's a lot to unpack there for sure.
For real.
Yeah.
So we've got this potential financial meltdown brewing, and then you've got crypto coming along talking about decentralized systems. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? How does it all connect?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the one hand, cryptocurrencies, particularly stablecoins, could offer a safe haven if traditional currencies collapse.
Yeah.
People might turn to those digital alternatives as a more stable store of value.
So kind of like a digital gold rush, but instead of panning for nuggets, everyone's mining for bitcoins?
In a way, yeah. But it's important to remember that the crypto world is still the Wild West in a lot of ways.
Right.
It's not immune to manipulation or crashes. We've seen some pretty spectacular ones already.
Sure.
There's still a lot of speculation and risk involved.
So it's not a guaranteed solution, more like a high-stakes experiment playing out on a global scale.
Precisely. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Even if cryptocurrencies themselves don't replace traditional finance, that underlying technology blockchain that has the potential to completely reshape the system.
Okay, so how so?
Imagine a financial system that's more efficient, more transparent, more secure.
Right.
That's what blockchain could enable.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got crypto potentially adding to the chaos or maybe offering stability, and then there's this whole other layer of blockchain technology with its own set of possibilities.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is. But before we go any further, there's another piece of this puzzle we haven't even touched on, artificial intelligence,
Hmm.
AI. It feels like it's everywhere these days. How does it play into all of this?
AI is a wild card for sure, with the potential to be both a stabilizing force and a source of major instability.
It's like handing a supercomputer the keys to the global economy. Are we going to see unprecedented growth or a complete meltdown?
Maybe both. It's a bit like having a super intelligent watchdog, except this one can make lightning-fast trading decisions on its own. And that's where the potential for instability comes in. What happens if that AI system makes a mistake? Or if it's fed bad data? Things could unravel very quickly.
That is a little unnerving. Okay, so we've got this complex web of economic forces, emerging technologies, and then you've got the human element too. How do we manage all of this responsibly? Where do we even begin?
It is complex, there's no doubt about it. But that's what makes these deep dives so important. We're not just skimming the surface, we're exploring the nuances, how everything connects, the potential pitfalls, and the incredible opportunities.
Okay, so let's keep digging. In the next part of this deep dive, we'll delve deeper into AI blockchain and how these technological forces could either accelerate a global financial meltdown or help us build a more resilient system. Stay tuned.
When you think about AI in finance, we're really just scratching the surface of what's possible. Like, imagine an AI system that can analyze mountains of data, but, in real time.
Okay, yeah.
It could spot patterns, red flags, risks way faster than any human. Could probably even head off some crises before they even start.
So it's like having a super smart guardian watching the markets for trouble.
Exactly.
But that's kind of unnerving too, right? Like what if it makes a mistake or gets bad data?
That's the flip side.
Yeah.
What happens when an AI that can make trades at lightning speed messes up? You could have a market crash in milliseconds.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely a chilling thought. And then there's the whole ethical side of it too, right? Like how do we make sure these AI systems are used responsibly when we're talking about something as crucial as finance?
Huge issue. We can't just set these things loose without guardrails. Think about loan applications. Imagine an AI approving or denying people based on data that's biased to begin with.
You'd just be making existing inequalities even worse.
Exactly. Which is why human oversight, ethical frameworks, all that becomes even more crucial. It's not just about preventing a financial meltdown, but an ethical one too.
That's a really good point. So where does that leave us then? It seems like we keep bumping up against this tension between the potential of technology and the very real risks.
And that's true for more than just AI, right? It goes for blockchain, crypto, the whole thing.
Yeah.
We're at this turning point where tech could go either way.
Right, like it could help us build a better system or it could make everything crash down faster.
Exactly. And the choices we make right now, how we handle these technologies, the rules we put in place, it's all going to shape what happens next.
So it's both exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Exactly. The decisions we make individually and collectively matter now more than ever. But, we've been focusing a lot on the potential downsides here. What if we pull it off? What if we actually manage to create a more stable, equitable financial system? What would that even look like?
It's like we're so worried about the earthquake that we haven't stopped to imagine what rebuilding could look like.
It's a crucial question.
Yeah.
We need to envision positive outcomes to work towards. What if finance wasn't just about profit, but about sustainability, inclusivity, people, and the planet thriving together?
That sounds amazing, but also incredibly difficult. How do we actually get from where we are now to that kind of system?
It's not one solution. It's a bunch of them working together. We've talked about blockchain and its potential there, but we also need to rethink debt, look at new economic models, and maybe most importantly, shift our whole mindset from short-term wins to playing the long game for sustainability.
This seems like a monumental shift, though, almost like we're talking about rewiring the entire operating system of the global economy.
That's what it is. Not tweaks here and there. It's a paradigm shift. And, big changes like that rarely happen easily.
Because there are people who benefit from the way things are, even if it's ultimately unsustainable. What kind of resistance do you think we'll see to this kind of transformation?
A lot of resistance to change boils down to fear. Fear of losing money, fear of what they don't understand, fear of giving up power. We see it with climate change, the move to renewable energy, even regulating new technology.
Yeah. That makes sense. So what you're saying is that even if we figure out the technology, even if we come up with a better system, there's still a huge human element to all of this.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to where we started this deep dive. We're facing all these converging crises, financial, technological, ecological, and they're all connected. It's overwhelming, but it also means we're not powerless. We have a say in how this plays out.
It's about making choices and taking action.
Exactly. And that's why these conversations are so important. The more we talk about this stuff, the more we question and challenge and imagine, the better equipped we'll be to actually build a better future.
It's almost like we've been so busy worrying about a potential financial earthquake that we haven't really thought about what a financial renaissance could look like.
It's interesting how, for so long, we've treated the environment as something separate from finance, like
Yeah.
it's some kind of externality.
Yeah.
But that way of thinking is changing really fast.
Hmm.
I mean, we're seeing the very real costs of climate change every single day.
Yeah.
Extreme weather, resource scarcity, people being forced to move.
Right.
These aren't hypotheticals anymore. They're impacting lives and economies right now.
And the crazy thing is that the way our economic systems work now often seems to be making the problem worse.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're trying to put out a fire with gasoline. But you talked about shifting our values from those short-term gains to long-term sustainability.
Yeah.
What would that actually look like in the real world?
Imagine if the true cost of production, like everything that goes into making something, including the environmental impact, imagine if that was factored into every product, every service, every investment.
Wow.
And renewable energy, not just being, the nice to have option, but actually the most economically sound choice.
Right.
Where if you conserve and do things sustainably, you're rewarded for it financially, not just ethically.
So instead of chasing profits no matter what, we start to realize that a healthy planet equals long-term prosperity.
Exactly.
But that's a huge mental shift, isn't it? Like we're talking about rewiring the entire operating system of the global economy.
That's exactly what it is. It's not about small adjustments here and there. It's a completely different way of looking at things.
And big changes like that, they usually come with some pushback.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's be real here. There are some very powerful interests who want to keep things exactly as they are, even if it's not sustainable in the long run. What kind of roadblocks do you see popping up if we try to make this kind of transformation happen?
Well, a lot of the resistance comes from fear. Fear of losing what they have, fear of the unknown, fear of giving up control. And we see that playing out everywhere in the climate change debates, the move to green energy, even just trying to regulate new technologies.
It's like people are afraid of change, even if that change is ultimately better for everyone.
Yeah, it's a natural human reaction.
Which brings us back to where we started this whole deep dive. We're dealing with all these crises at the same time, financial, technological, ecological, and they're all feeding into each other. It can feel really overwhelming.
It's a lot to process for sure. But it also reminds us that we're not just along for the ride here. You know what I mean? We have choices. We have a voice. We can actually influence what happens next.
We absolutely can. And that's what makes these conversations so important. By talking about this stuff, by asking tough questions, by really imagining a better future, we empower ourselves to make better choices and take action.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a few things to think about. Number one, the future isn't set in stone. We're creating it every day with the choices we make.
Right.
Number two, never underestimate how powerful knowledge is and thinking critically. The more you understand about how the world works, the better equipped you'll be to deal with it.
Absolutely.
And finally, remember that we're all in this together. The problems are big and messy, but so are the solutions.
It's not about predicting the future. It's about creating it.
Perfectly said. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive, but the conversation doesn't have to end here. Keep asking those questions, keep looking at things from different angles, and most importantly, keep believing in the power of collective action to create a more just, sustainable, and prosperous future. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.